In the quiet village of Umoma, the stars shone brightly the night Adaku went into labor. Her cries echoed through the still air, calling the village midwife to her small mud house. The woman, experienced in the ways of birth, hurried to her side, expecting another routine delivery. But when the baby finally arrived, the room fell silent. The midwife, who had seen countless births, paused as she held the newborn in her hands. The baby was unlike any other child she had ever delivered. This child had both male and female parts. Her tiny face was as beautiful as the rising sun, and her skin, soft and glowing, seemed to carry a mysterious light. The midwife quickly wrapped her, ensuring the baby was well covered before well-wishers started flocking in the following day. To anyone else, she looked like a perfect baby girl. But the secret hidden in her body was known only to the midwife and her mother. Adaku, weak but eager, reached for her child. The midwife gently placed the baby in her arms and whispered, "This one is different, Adaku. The gods have given you something special, but no one must know. Not the villagers." Adaku's heart sank, fear and confusion swirling in her chest. She stared at her baby's innocent face. "What do I do?" she asked in a shaky voice. The midwife's eyes softened. "Raise her as a girl. Keep her secret. The world will not understand, and the village, they will only fear what they do not know." Adaku nodded slowly. She knew the dangers of people finding out. The village was full of stories of strange things that brought bad luck. She couldn't let that happen to her child. She looked down at her newborn, cradling her tiny body close. "Chimdindu," she whispered. "God has kept me alive, and he will keep you too." Chimdindu, meaning God sustains, felt like the perfect name. It was a prayer, a hope that the gods who allowed her to survive childbirth would also protect her child in a world that was not kind to those who were different. The baby's eyes fluttered open, and at that moment, Adaku felt a fierce, protective love rush through her. No matter what happened, this child was hers, and she would protect Chimdindu with everything she had. From that night, Adaku vowed to raise Chimdindu as a girl, hiding the truth about her male private part. The child would live a life full of secrets, but Adaku would do everything to ensure her daughter knew love and safety. Before Chimdindu was born, life had already dealt Adaku a heavy blow. Her husband, Ifeanyi, was a strong and hard-working man, known for his kindness and wisdom in the village of Umoma. Their marriage had been filled with joy, though brief. Ifeanyi had dreams of building a life with Adaku, raising children and growing old together. But those dreams were cut short when sickness took him one cold Harmattan morning. Adaku, newly married and still young, was left alone before she even knew she was pregnant. The village was full of whispers. They pitied the young widow, watching her with concerned eyes as she moved through the village, her head always low, her heart heavy with grief. The women of Umoma came to her aid, offering food, advice, and companionship. But nothing could fill the emptiness Ifeanyi's death left in her. When Adaku discovered she was carrying his child, her heart both leaped with joy and sank in fear. She clung to the memory of her husband, praying the child would bring back a piece of him into her life. But even as the village rallied around her, showing her kindness, there was always an edge of curiosity. People watched her closely, always wondering how she would survive without a man by her side, and how she would raise her child alone. As Chimdindu grew in her womb, Adaku carried the weight of both hope and loneliness. She swore to herself that she would be strong for her child, that she would give her the love and protection that Ifeanyi would have wanted. But nothing could have prepared her for the secret she would have to guard so carefully once Chimdindu was born. Chimdindu, even though she was different, was her greatest joy, but also her deepest fear. From the moment she held her daughter in her arms, Adaku knew she would have to shield her from a world that would never understand. As the years passed, Chimdindu became the pride of the village. Her beauty was unmatched. Her large, dark eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her thick, long hair flowed like woven silk. When she smiled, it was as if the sun broke through the clouds. The village boys were mesmerized by her grace, following her with shy, admiring glances. The girls too envied her, wishing they could be as beautiful as Chimdindu. But despite all the attention and admiration, Chimdindu didn't know she was different. To her, she was just like every other girl in Umuoma. She ran through the village with her friends, laughing, playing, and doing the things all young girls did. Her days were filled with the simple joys of childhood, helping her mother fetch water, gathering firewood, and listening to the old women tell stories by the fireside. However, Adaku was always there, watchful, protecting her daughter in ways Chimdindu did not understand. From a young age, Adaku had drilled rules into her daughter's mind. "Chimdindu," she would say in a soft but firm voice. "Never undress in front of anyone. Always be careful when you go to the stream. And when you use the bathroom, make sure no one sees you." "Why, Mama?" Chimdindu would ask, her face full of innocent curiosity. "That's how everyone does it," Adaku would reply, her voice tight with the fear she hid deep inside. "It's important." Chimdindu accepted her mother's words without question. After all, she had never seen anyone else's body up close. She assumed everyone had something to hide, that this was simply how the world worked. When she watched the other girls go to secluded places to relieve themselves or bathe, she thought they too were protecting some secret part of themselves. She laughed and played with the other children, but always made sure to stay covered, just as her mother had taught her. She believed it was normal. As far as she knew, every girl in Umuoma was just like her. As Chimdindu grew older, though, small things began to nag at her. She listened carefully when the other girls giggled and whispered about the changes happening in their bodies. They talked about their first moons and the way their bodies shifted as they became women. But when Chimdindu quietly asked her mother about these things, Adaku would grow tense. "It's normal, my child," her mother would say quickly, brushing off the conversation. "Just remember, always be private." Chimdindu felt confused, but she trusted her mother. She saw the care people took in hiding their bodies, and she thought it confirmed that her own body, though different in ways she could not fully understand, was no stranger than anyone else's. For Chimdindu, life was still sweet. She was surrounded by people who adored her, and she felt the love of her mother deeply. By the time Chimdindu turned 18, her beauty had fully blossomed. Her beauty was unmatched. Her large, dark eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her hair was thick and long like woven silk. She was no longer the curious, playful girl who ran through the village with her friends. Now she walked with grace, her steps light as the breeze that carried her laughter. Her large, expressive eyes held a quiet wisdom, and her soft, radiant skin made her stand out wherever she went. Her hair, thick and long like flowing silk, was the envy of every girl in Umuoma. The boys, many of them her childhood friends, were no longer content to simply admire her from afar. They were now men, and Chimdindu's beauty drew them like moths to a flame. Suitors began to flock to Adaku's doorstep, coming from neighboring villages and beyond. The young men came with gifts, yams, cloth, and even goats, hoping to win Chimdindu's hand in marriage. Her beauty had become a legend of sorts, and every mother whispered about her to their sons, telling them that marrying Chimdindu would bring honor to their families. But Chimdindu, unaware of the truth about her body, found the attention confusing. While other girls her age seemed excited by the idea of marriage, Chimdindu felt something different, an unease she couldn't quite explain. Though she smiled politely at the young men who came to visit, she always found a way to gently decline their proposals. She didn't understand why, but deep down, something held her back. Adaku, watching from the sidelines, grew more anxious with each passing day. She had always known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. Chimdindu's beauty was becoming a burden, a magnet for attention that Adaku feared would one day unravel the secret she had worked so hard to protect. Every time a suitor came, Adaku felt her heart race with fear. She knew that one day Chimdindu would no longer be able to avoid marriage, and what would happen then? How could she protect her daughter from a husband who would discover the truth on their wedding night? The thought haunted her, but Adaku kept her fears hidden, just as she had hidden Chimdindu's secret all these years. "There's still time," she told herself. "Maybe something will happen." Then one day a new suitor arrived. His name was Uche, a wealthy trader from a distant village. He was tall, with strong, confident features, and a charm that made people feel at ease around him. Unlike the other men who were dazzled by Chimdindu's beauty and came with rehearsed compliments, Uche was different. He didn't rush to impress her or overwhelm her with gifts. Instead, he spent time talking to her, asking about her life, her interests, her dreams. He made her laugh, and his kindness touched her heart in ways she hadn't expected. For the first time, Chimdindu felt something stir within her, something warm, something that made her want to spend more time with Uche. Slowly, without even realizing it, she began to fall in love. Adaku, watching from a distance, noticed the change in her daughter. Chimdindu's face lit up whenever Uche was around, her eyes sparkling in a way they hadn't before. And though Adaku was happy to see her daughter smile, the pit of fear in her stomach only grew deeper. She could only hope Uche would accept her for who she was. For to Adaku, nothing was more precious and perfect than her beloved daughter. Uche, too, began to feel something more than admiration for Chimdindu. He saw beyond her beauty. He saw her gentle spirit, her intelligence, and her kindness. After months of visiting her, laughing with her, and learning about the things she loved, Uche knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. So one evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, Uche asked for her hand in marriage. Chimdindu's heart raced. She had never imagined herself married, never thought about what it meant to be someone's wife, to share a life with another person. But as she looked into Uche's eyes, filled with love and sincerity, she found herself saying, yes. The news spread quickly through Umuma. The beautiful Chimdindu was finally getting married, and to a wealthy, handsome trader, no less. The village was abuzz with excitement, and the preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. Uche's family came bearing more gifts than anyone had ever seen: yams, goats, fabrics, and even gold trinkets. It was clear that this wedding would be a grand affair, the talk of the village for years to come. But as the wedding day approached, Adaku's fear grew heavier, pressing down on her like a weight she could no longer carry. She wanted to be happy for her daughter, but every time she thought about the wedding night, her heart clenched with dread. She had kept the secret for so long, and now it felt like the world was closing in. She prayed. Every night she prayed to the gods to protect Chimdindu, to somehow keep the truth hidden. But deep down, Adaku knew that once Chimdindu was married, she could no longer shield her daughter from the world. Soon, Uche would know. The day of Chimdindu's wedding was one the village of Umuoma would remember for many years. From dawn, the air was filled with music, laughter, and the vibrant colors of celebration. Women from the village danced in bright wrappers, their feet kicking up dust as they moved to the beat of the drums. Men gathered in small groups, talking about how lucky Uche was to marry the most beautiful girl in the village. Chimdindu sat quietly in her room, surrounded by women who adorned her in the finest wrappers and gold jewelry Uche had gifted. Her hair was braided into an elaborate style, with beads woven into the thick black strands. She should have felt happy. After all, this was her wedding day. But deep inside, there was a nervous flutter she couldn't ignore. Her mother, Adaku, watched her daughter from the corner of the room, trying to hide the anxiety that gripped her heart. She forced a smile whenever Chimdindu looked her way, but inside she was filled with dread. The wedding had come too fast. The day she had feared for years was here, and no amount of prayers could change what was about to happen. The village gathered at the central square for the ceremony, and it was as grand as anyone had expected. Uche stood tall and proud, dressed in his best agbada, his face beaming with happiness. Chimdindu, graceful and radiant, walked down to meet him. The whole village erupted in cheers as the ceremony began. The elders blessed the couple, prayers were said, and vows were exchanged. By the time the sun had dipped low in the sky, Chimdindu and Uche were officially husband and wife. The feast that followed was full of joy. Laughter, music, and dancing filled the village square. People celebrated late into the night, eating, drinking, and praising the beautiful union between Chimdindu and Uche. But even amidst all the joy, Adaku could not shake the heavyweight in her heart. She smiled when people spoke to her, but the worry never left her mind. As the night grew older, the time came for Chimdindu and Uche to retire to their matrimonial room. The guests slowly began to leave, and the village grew quiet. Uche, his face filled with love, held Chimdindu's hand and led her to the small room they would share as husband and wife. Chimdindu, still nervous, smiled softly as she followed him. She had heard stories about what happens between a husband and wife on their wedding night, But her mother had never explained the details. Adaku had kept her in the dark about many things. And now, as Chimdindu entered the room with Uche, a strange feeling of confusion crept into her heart. The room was dimly lit, with soft mats laid out on the floor, and a small oil lamp casting flickering shadows on the walls. Uche sat down beside Chimdindu, his eyes filled with tenderness. He gently touched her cheek, smiling at the woman he had fallen in love with. Chimdindu smiled back, but her heart was racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she trusted Uche. She trusted that everything would be fine, just as her mother had always assured her. As Uche began to undress her, Chimdindu felt her hands tremble slightly. She reminded herself of her mother's words, always stay private. But this was her husband now, the man she had promised to share her life with. There was no need to hide anything from him, she thought. But as Uche's hands moved to the final piece of cloth, he suddenly froze. His fingers, which had been so gentle, now stopped, as though they had touched something wrong. His face, once soft with love, became tight with confusion. Slowly he moved back, staring at Chimdindu's body with wide, disbelieving eyes. What is this?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Chimdindu, confused by his reaction, looked down at herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. She didn't understand why he was acting this way. Uche stumbled backward, his face pale. His eyes, which had once been filled with love, were now clouded with shock and disbelief. You are not a woman," he stammered, the words barely making it past his lips. "How can this be? How did I manage to marry a man?" Chimdindu's heart pounded in her chest, fear flooding her mind. She didn't understand. "But I am," she cried, her voice breaking. "I am a woman." Tears filled her eyes as Uche backed away from her, his hands shaking. He couldn't speak, couldn't think. He only stared at her, horrified by what he had discovered. At that moment, Chimdindu realized for the first time that her body was not like the others. The secret her mother had kept from her for so long was now laid bare, and the weight of it crashed down on her like a heavy storm. She had lived her whole life not knowing, believing she was just like every other girl. But now, in the eyes of the man she loved, she saw the truth. She was different, and the world she had known would never be the same again. Uche, unable to handle what he had seen, turned and rushed out of the room, leaving Chimdindu alone and devastated. The silence of the night closed in around her as she sat there, trembling, her tears falling silently onto the floor. By dawn, the village of Umuoma was buzzing with whispers. News of what had happened in the bridal chamber spread faster than wildfire. People gathered in small groups, murmuring in hushed tones, their voices carrying disbelief and curiosity. "Have you heard? Uche left Chimdindu in the night," they said. "They say she is not truly a woman," another would add, eyes wide with shock. Some blamed the gods, others spoke of curses, while a few whispered that Chimdindu was a strange creation sent to test the village. Whatever the explanation, one thing was clear. The secret Adaku had kept for so long was now in the open, and nothing would ever be the same. Inside her mother's hut, Chimdindu sat curled in the corner, her eyes swollen from crying through the night. She could still feel the weight of Uche's shocked gaze on her, the disbelief and horror in his voice as he uncovered her secret. It played over and over in her mind, tearing her heart apart with each memory. Adaku sat beside her, her own face streaked with tears. The pain of seeing her daughter broken was almost too much to bear. She had always known this day might come, but she had hoped, prayed, that somehow Chimdindu would be spared from this suffering. Now, it was too late. "Chimdindu, my daughter," Adaku began softly, her voice heavy with guilt. "I should have told you. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Chimdindu looked up, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "What truth, Mama? What is wrong with me? Why did Uche look at me like I was something terrible?" Adaku's heart shattered at the sight of her daughter's pain. She took a deep breath and began to tell her the story she had kept hidden for 18 long years. "When you were born," Adaku said quietly, "you were different from other children. You had the body of both a boy and a girl. The midwife and I decided to keep it a secret." Chimdindu's eyes filled with fresh tears. "But why, Mama? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you make me think I was just like everyone else?" Adaku wept openly now, her voice shaking. "I thought I was protecting you, my child. I thought if the world didn't know, You could live a normal life. I wanted to spare you from their judgment, their cruelty. But now, I see that I only hurt you. Chimdindu felt her chest tighten with emotions she didn't know how to handle. Anger, sadness, confusion, they all swirled inside her, too much to bear. She had trusted her mother, trusted that everything she had been told was true. But now, her entire world felt like a lie. As the two women sat in their shared grief, the sound of footsteps approaching the hut broke the silence. Adaku quickly wiped her tears. The village elders had arrived. They entered the hut quietly, their faces solemn. Chief Okeki, the oldest and most respected of the elders, stepped forward and looked down at Chimdindu, his expression unreadable. Behind him stood several other elders, their eyes heavy with judgment. Adaku, Chief Okeki began, his deep voice filling the room. The village has heard what happened last night. There is much confusion and fear. We need to understand the truth. Adaku stood slowly, her body trembling. She had known this moment was coming. She had prepared herself for it many times in her mind. But now that it was here, the weight of it felt unbearable. Chimdindu, still sitting on the floor, looked up at the elders. She could see the judgment in their eyes, the way they looked at her as if she was something strange, something they couldn't understand. Chief Okeki turned his gaze to Chimdindu. My child, is it true what the people are saying? Were you born with the body of both a man and a woman? Chimdindu's throat felt tight. She didn't know how to answer. She hadn't even fully understood the truth until last night. And now the whole village was asking for answers she didn't have. Adaku stepped forward, shielding her daughter with her body. It's true, she said quietly, her voice filled with sorrow. Chimdindu was born with both male and female parts, but I raised her as a girl to protect her. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions grave. One of the younger elders, Nwafor, frowned deeply. This is a serious matter, he said. Our traditions do not speak of such things. How are we to understand this? Is it a curse or a test from the gods? The room grew tense, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Chief Okeki, however, remained silent, his eyes fixed on Chimdindu. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. The gods make no mistakes. Perhaps Chimdindu's birth is not something to be feared, but something we must learn to accept. His words hung in the air, but the other elders remained uncertain. The village had never faced something like this before, and fear often made people seek easy answers. But Chief Okeki's wisdom carried weight, and he turned to Adaku with a soft gaze. We will not judge the child for what she cannot control, he said. But there will be whispers, and the people will talk. How Chimdindu lives from this day on is for her to decide. Adaku bowed her head in gratitude, though her heart was still heavy. The elders left the hut in silence, leaving mother and daughter alone once more. Chimdindu, though grateful for the chief's words, still felt lost. She had lived her whole life believing she was one thing, and now everything was different. The village would never look at her the same way again. The life she had known, the dreams she had for her future, all of it had crumbled in a single night. Her heart ached as she thought of Uche, the man she had come to love. He had left her without a word, and now she was alone, with nothing but the weight of her secret exposed for all to see. She turned to her mother, her voice small and broken. What do I do now, Mama? Adaku, her own tears flowing again, wrapped her arms around her daughter. We will find a way, my child. The world may not understand, but you are still my Chimdindu. We will walk this road together. The days after Chimdindu's wedding were long and painful. The once busy paths she walked every day now felt cold and lonely. The village of Umoma, which had celebrated her beauty and grace, now whispered behind her back. She could feel their stares, hear their murmurs as she passed by. The cursed one, they called her, or the one the gods made wrong. Chimdindu, heartbroken and confused, barely left her mother's hut. She couldn't bear the looks of curiosity or disgust. The dream of her life with Uche had shattered, and now she was left with the pieces, unable to put them back together. Adaku, feeling the weight of her daughter's suffering, did all she could to comfort her, but it was not enough. No matter what she said, Chimdindu's heart remained heavy. The shame, the confusion, the sense of betrayal, it was all too much. Adaku watched helplessly, knowing her daughter's pain ran deeper than words could heal. But then, one afternoon, a visitor came to their hut. It was an old woman, a respected elder known for her wisdom and spiritual insight. Her name was Mama Nkem, and she had heard the whispers about Chimdindu, the child born with the body of both a man and a woman. Unlike the others, Mama Nkem didn't come with judgment or curiosity. She came with understanding. When Adaku opened the door, the old woman greeted her warmly. Her eyes, though aged, held a gentle light. She asked to speak with Chimdindu, and after a moment of hesitation, Adaku invited her inside. Chimdindu, sitting quietly in the corner, looked up as Mama Nkem entered. The old woman's presence was calm and soothing, and for the first time in days, Chimdindu felt something other than despair. Mama Nkem sat beside Chimdindu and took her hand, her wrinkled fingers warm and soft. "My child," she began, her voice low and full of wisdom. "I have heard what happened. I have come not to judge you, but to help you understand." Chimdindu's eyes filled with tears. "How can you help me? I don't even understand myself. I don't know who I am anymore." Mama Nkem smiled gently. "You are still you, Chimdindu. You are still the same person you were before this secret was revealed. What has changed is not you, but the way the world sees you." Chimdindu shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "But I am not like everyone else. I don't even know what I am. Am I a man? Am I a woman? I don't understand." The old woman sighed softly, her eyes full of compassion. "You are both, my dear, and you are neither. You are something unique, something the gods created with purpose. The world may not understand, but that does not mean the gods made a mistake." Chimdindu looked at her, confused. "But why did they make me this way? Why would they give me this body if I'm only going to be rejected by everyone?" Mama Nkem's grip on her hand tightened. "The gods do not always reveal their reasons, but they do not make mistakes. You were born this way for a reason, Chimdindu. Your journey may be harder than others, but that does not make it less important." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "The problem is not with your body. The problem is with the world and its fear of what it cannot understand. You are not a curse. You are not a mistake. You are simply different." Chimdindu wiped her tears, her heart aching. "But the village, Uche, they all think I'm something to be feared." Mama Nkem nodded slowly. "Fear is powerful, my child, but it does not define you. You must learn to accept yourself first, before you worry about the judgment of others. Once you understand your own worth, the whispers of the village will no longer matter." Chimdindu sat quietly, absorbing the elder's words. Could it be true? Could she really learn to accept herself when everything she had known was falling apart? Mama Nkem leaned in closer, her voice soft but firm. "The road ahead will not be easy, Chimdindu. You will face many challenges, but you are strong, and you are not alone. Your mother loves you, and there are others in this world who will see you for who you are, not for what they fear." The elder rose to leave, but before she did, she placed a small carved wooden figure into Chimdindu's hand. It was a figure of a person, but unlike the usual carvings of men or women, this one had features of both. It was neither male nor female. It was both. "This is you," Mama Nkem said. "A creation of the gods, meant to walk your own path. Keep this close and remember, your worth does not come from the body you were born with, but from the heart you carry within you." As Mama Nkem left, Chimdindu sat in silence, turning the carved figure over in her hands. Her heart felt lighter, but the pain was still there. The journey to acceptance, as Mama Nkem had said, would not be easy, but for the first time since the wedding night, Chimdindu felt a glimmer of hope. Adaku came to sit beside her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone, Chimdindu," she whispered. "We will face this together." And for the first time in days, Chimdindu smiled through her tears. The path ahead was still unclear, but she knew now that she was not walking it alone. Though the village still whispered behind her back, Chimdindu now walked through Umuoma with her head held high. The weight of their stares no longer pressed on her shoulders as it once did. She had come to terms with her body, and the secret that had once haunted her was no longer a burden she carried in shame. Instead, it became a part of her story, one she had embraced with open arms. The journey had not been easy. There were still days when the pain of Uche's rejection stung, when the echoes of hurtful words whispered through her mind. But with Maman Kem's wisdom and the unwavering love of her mother, Chimdindu had found something more valuable than the approval of others, her own self-worth. She no longer defined herself by the narrow standards of the village. Chimdindu had learned that her identity was hers to shape, and that no one else had the right to tell her what she could or could not be. Though she was born different, it did not make her any less of a person. She was still the same Chimdindu, beautiful, kind, and strong. She spent more time in the quiet of nature now, where the trees stood tall and the wind whispered truths the village could never understand. Often she found herself walking to a hidden clearing deep in the bush, a place she had discovered as a child. Here, under the shade of ancient trees, she could think, reflect, and simply be. It was in this quiet sanctuary that Chimdindu often found her peace, away from the world that still clung to its whispers. But recently, she had not been alone in this space. One person knew of this secret place, her childhood friend, Obinna. Obinna had grown up next door to Chimdindu, their lives entwined by the closeness of their families. They had played together as children, running through the fields, chasing goats and swimming in the stream. He had always been kind to her, even when they both grew older and the distance between boys and girls seemed to widen. When the village turned its back on Chimdindu after the wedding, Obinna had not joined them in their cruel whispers. Instead, he had sought her out. At first, Chimdindu had been hesitant to let him near. After Uche, she wasn't sure if she could trust anyone again, especially a man. But Obinna was different. He had known her since they were children, long before the world's expectations had tried to define them both. One afternoon, as Chimdindu sat quietly in the clearing, her mind wandering over the events of the past few months, she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Chimdindu," Obinna called softly, his voice always gentle when he spoke her name. She looked over her shoulder and smiled as he approached. His presence had become a welcome comfort in these uncertain times. Unlike the others, he had never asked questions, never demanded explanations. He simply accepted her as she was. "You come here too often," Chimdindu teased, though her smile revealed her pleasure in seeing him. "What if I wanted to be alone?" Obinna laughed, sitting down beside her on the soft grass. "Then you would have told me by now." He looked at her with a familiarity that warmed her heart. "Besides, you know this place belongs to both of us." Chimdindu chuckled, shaking her head. "So you say." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the forest around them. For a long time, neither spoke. It was something Chimdindu had come to appreciate about Obinna. He never rushed her to talk, never pushed her to open up before she was ready. He understood her quietness, her need for space, and in that understanding, she had found safety. After a while, Chimdindu turned to him, her gaze soft but searching. "Why do you keep coming here, Obinna? You know the villagers call me a man. You know what happened? Or are you looking for a man to keep you company?" Obinna's eyes met hers, and in them, she saw not pity, but something deeper. Something she hadn't seen in Uche or anyone else. "Nonsense. I have never seen any man as beautiful as you are." "I come here because I see you, Chimdindu," he said simply. "Not what the village says, not what people think. I see you." Chimdindu felt a warmth spread through her chest, a quiet comfort that soothed the last lingering doubts in her heart. Obinna's acceptance of her, of all that she was, felt genuine, without the weight of judgment or fear. "You know everything about me now," Chimdindu whispered, "and yet you're still here." Obinna smiled, his hand brushing lightly against hers. "Of course I'm still here. I've always known you, Chimdindu. Nothing has changed. If anything, I understand you more now than ever before." His words settled over her like a gentle breeze, and for the first time, Chimdindu allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something new. It wasn't the kind of love the village spoke of. It wasn't the grand, perfect story she had once dreamed of with Uche. But it was real. It was rooted in friendship, in understanding, and in the quiet acceptance of all that she was. As they sat together, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, Chimdindu felt the last of her fears begin to melt away. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she didn't feel the need to have all the answers. She was no longer defined by the expectations of others. She had found her own path, and with Obinna by her side, it felt like a new beginning. Though the whispers in the village might never completely fade, Chimdindu had learned that they didn't matter. What mattered was the peace she had found within herself, and the quiet but steady love that was growing between her and Obinna. As they sat in the clearing, the world felt wide open, full of possibilities. At that moment, Chimdindu knew that whatever came next, she was ready. It wasn't her fault that she was born different from everyone else, and through it all, she had learned to accept her uniqueness.